Good morning. It's always great to be in this house, the Poynter Institute, which I call like a second home. As Roy said, he was the first person hired here full time, and I was the second. So you walk in here, and even if you've been away for 2 years or 3 years, it always feels like home. So today we are going to talk about two tempos, rhythms for storytelling in the digital age. And I know our time is limited, so we are going to do a sort of a rapid Cuban-style conversation here. So much has changed that just the fact that a 67-year-old would stand up here to talk to you, that is all about disruption. I mean, how many times have I had to keep up or change if you've been in this business 42 years? And it's good to review the news cycle and how we consume news then. There was a kiosk at the corner, there was a paper boy. Or you read your paper in the morning, there is Ricky Ricardo, he was my English teacher. We listened to radio in the car on the way to work. We seldom miss Walter Cronkite at 6 p.m. And if we were up before 10 or 11, we would actually catch up on the 11 o'clock news. In between, and this is what's important, the news largely left us alone. We went to work, we did things. There was a cycle for news, and there was a cycle for everything else. If there was an emergency, grandma has died, you would get a telegram. And that would imply, as Roy mentioned, disruption. Something bad has happened if you got a telegram. Technology limited the pace of how news traveled. When printing a newspaper on a mass scale, for example, you could not update an edition every 5 minutes to accommodate the latest news. Most news sources appeared in regular editions at a regular time, allowing for intensive editing and eventually art direction. Not so today. What is the news cycle now? It all began to change in 1991 when the internet came about. And today we have what I call the media quartet, and ready to change it into a quintet tomorrow or next week. Every media company knows that you have to deal with the four basic platforms: the phone, the tablet, print, and online. Print is not going to disappear, but it's not going to be the protagonist. And as long as you remember that, all is well. It is only those who still believe that print is king and try to push that on a daily basis in their newsrooms that are doomed. Things have changed. It is a media quartet, and if I had to put my money into one of those platforms, if this was Vegas, if I was gambling, I would put it into this platform. If I had to decide today, because of disruption, you're going to concentrate on working for one platform, it will be the phone. And so all of the big media companies in the world, when they are marketing their products, I always recommend that they do this. Don't advise only one platform. Whether you advertise at the airport, buses, trains, automobiles, whatever, you have to tell your audience, we report the news and you can consume that news through any of these platforms. Interestingly enough, we have evidence through focus groups in which I participate that there are people using 3 of these platforms on average every day, and they're not even aware of that. They might begin to read a story on that paper that's on their coffee table. Time to catch a train, they continue reading on the phone, the same story. 3 stops later, they get up and they finish reading at their desk. One story, one member of the audience, 3 platforms. And if you were to ask them, they're not even aware that they switch platforms. That's the way it is. We are connected and addicted, and the more pings we get, the happier we seem to be. If we go 5 minutes without anybody sending you a text message, you believe that the world is not loving you anymore. It's just as easy to put out a tweet about breaking news as it is a massive year-long investigative report. Journalists of today, storytellers of today, must be able to go from the tweet, the 140 characters, to the compact story, to the secondary story, to the in-depth report. If you're not ready to do that, you don't belong in this business. You have to do the short of it all, the medium size of it all, and the long of it all. There is no evidence that people do not want to read long, and more, there is evidence that people will read long on mobile devices. It is only people of a certain age that are proud to tell you nobody reads long on a mobile device. I disagree. And at the bottom of all of this is the story. That hasn't changed since I was a 19-year-old intern at the Miami News and the Miami Herald. If you have a good story, people will read you. The difference is the seduction process has to be longer. You have to start seducing with a headline. Headline writing has never been more important. You have to seduce with a headline and then hook me maybe with a tweet-like summary. And after that, you dive into the story and you read. So one thing that hasn't changed since we were teaching, Roy and I were on stage teaching here, writing and design is the story is what it's all about. The platform is very secondary. If the default then was an edited package of news at a specific time, the default now is a second-by-second update. And that is what throws a lot of people in newsrooms off. Today, we observe two tempos for storytelling. And this is what I train my students at Columbia in a multi-platform course that they have to be aware of. There is the 24/7, the constant flow of information. Everybody wants to know that if anything happened, I'm going to get a ping here, and my phone is going to tell me a plane has crashed, or there has been further unrest in Ferguson, whatever the story is, I'm going to get that. But at the same time, we are beginning to notice in the last 18 months a desire for people to have this moment when the world sort of stops and editors, human beings, select some information and curate it for you. And that is a very important step. We all have the fear that we're not informed enough. Have I missed anything when I went into the restroom? Have I missed anything when I was in a meeting and not connected? So the curated edition does that. The 5 top stories that you should know about at 6 o'clock in the morning or at 6 p.m. in the evening. There is quite a renaissance of that curated edition we always did. I remember in my young years working with the afternoon newspaper, the Miami News, we had 3 or 4 editions a day. There's nothing new about that. There was the 10 o'clock in the morning, the lunchtime edition in Miami, the 6 o'clock going home edition, and you felt that someone had packaged these together for you. It's just like walking into a supermarket at 7 p.m. You don't know what you're going to cook, a huge supermarket, but at the door someone says, well, the supermarket is full of goodies, but if you would like a cooked meal, here's a bag, ready, and we like to reach for that bag. That's what this is. We want the tempo of constant flow and the curated tempo. I call it the harbor light theory. I love harbor lights. I guess I was born in an island. The harbor light is always sweeping through the city, but it can stop. Let's say that the police would like to see what's happening in a certain point. You can stop. But the one analogy I use with editors to express this, which resonates, is raw meat versus the cooked sirloin. All day long, you have to be throwing raw meat at them out there. You find out that something happened, put it in there. Put a tweet out there. 10 minutes later, you know something else. Those lions are hungry for raw meat, and you've got to do that. When I went to journalism school, there was no raw meat. They will tell you, don't write a story until you have all the facts. Can you imagine what would happen if we were operating like that today? So the raw meat is important, and there are people in every newsroom that specialize in this. They know exactly how to throw that raw meat out there. But then, that's the lean forward. The phone is ideal for raw meat. Print, the tablet, the lean back. Now that I know that this happened at 6 o'clock in the evening or tonight before I go to bed, I'm going to get in and start reading the why of this story. Newsrooms need to do both. That kind of tempo is not easy because we're more used to this than that. There's an increasing appreciation for the role both tempos can play in a news organization. So we're going to talk about legacy and startup news organizations that are doing interesting things. Obviously, the 24/7 is about interruptions and everywhereness. I tell my students at Columbia, train to deal with the journalism of interruptions. The days when somebody would begin reading your story and read it until the end without interruptions, gone. Now you may begin reading on the train, get off the train, you might get an email, You might get a ping that says you have a Facebook like, and you turn to that and you come back to this. What does that mean? Writing shorter paragraphs, subheads, subtitles in the middle of stories, expedite the process. If I'm reading a story and I get interrupted, but then you have a subhead that says, what next for Hillary? That is internal navigation. So there is a way to do all of this. We cannot have long paragraphs if you're going to have those stories in mobile devices. Speed with accuracy, short over long for the raw meat, facts more than analysis. So breaking news, for example, is a non-legacy outfit. They curate the latest pieces of news around the world. They provide brief, fast updates. The creators came to the conclusion that time saved is much better than time spent. I subscribed to it. There was no print. There was no big elephant in the room. So they give you raw meat as it happens. And that's what you see. Very simplistic design, very easy to assimilate. And a key person, and the person that will be in great demand in years to come, and already most of the people writing to me for references are looking for a mobile editor, whether in Singapore, in London, or anywhere. It's the person who can curate information in a hurry for an audience that thrives on frequent interruptions. Cory Bergman, I was writing a blog about this, and I asked him to send me a definition. What would be a good mobile editor? Well, he says mobile curators for us have fast, great news judgment, Twitter junkies, tight and bright writers, and social sleuths. I love that definition. We are beginning to see products that aim at raw meat. We compete with established news media. Circa, the Fast Financial Times, smartwatches are coming in, Google Glass, heaven knows what will be next. But a lot of these products are aimed at the quick, and you still will have platforms like the tablet and print and the online to give you more of the rest. Then we come into curated. This is where great editors, great storytellers, great art directors are needed. These are discrete editions, carefully crafted words and images, complex multimedia storytelling, deeper perspective, and longer time frame. In other words, sort of the old traditional journalism, but dressed up in the style of the digital. Projects that we're doing. I think that one of the biggest disruptors that nobody talks about, but I feel it and I sense it, is the issue of frequency. All of us in this room who worked in a publication, we began to follow a cycle of whatever the frequency of your publication was. So if you're a daily newspaper, you live from 6 in the morning to 6 in the morning. At 10 o'clock, everybody gather. Okay, lifestyle, what do you have for tomorrow? Business, what do you have? The sad part is that there are still meetings like this. There are newsrooms when you walk in, and I visit at least 2 newsrooms every week of my life, they tell you, we now are digital first. If I hear that one more time, I don't know what I'll do. And we are, notice that there are no walls in this newsroom. Architecturally, there are no walls. Then you sit in the 10 o'clock meeting. It could be 1968. They are planning a newspaper, emphasis on paper. And you sit there and you say, easier to tear down the walls, easier to do all of this than change the human condition. Obviously, there are many editors, might be 50, 55, still 10 years away from retirement, who come in there to romance the newspaper. I romance the newspaper, but I don't rent a room. You know, I love the newspaper. And so, here we are in Paris. Paris Match is a magazine that has been around for 75 years. It's a combination of Time, the old Life magazine in photography, and People. And I redesigned it 3 times. This is a magazine that gave us Brigitte Bardot, for example. She came there at the age of 19 to model, and the rest was history. So I came in to do my 3rd redesign of this magazine because Vanity Fair was coming into France. So we want to tweak the typography. You know, at my age, if I'm going to get on an airplane and go somewhere, I'm going to disrupt. I don't want to go there to change one more typeface. Been there, done that. Redesign is not what we do. Rethink is what we do. Rethink and disrupt as much as you can. And so while they're telling me, let's change the typography a little bit, I'm thinking, You should change your frequency. Why go every Monday with your magazine? You should have a 6 p.m. edition on the phone. Take your brand to what the young people are using. Everybody knows Perry Match, but it's their mothers and grandmothers who are reading it in print. So we go, this is the way it looks. It's a nice looking magazine, very timely. This is the way it will be in about 2 months. When they go into a new edition, you get the mini moments of what's happening in the life of a newspaper, in the life of a magazine. Some of the best moments in a newsroom are never make it to print or to publication. It's the conversations between the editors. So you have James Franco in their studio for a photo shoot, a traditional photo shoot of 14 pages for next week's newspaper. 200 photos are taken, 10 will be used. What do you do with the other? At 6 o'clock every night in your phone edition, you're teasing me about. The long interview is 50 questions. You have one question for James Franco. And every day you have a little bit of this. You tell me, we're talking to James Franco, we're doing this, we're doing that. And in 3 minutes, you have an edition with a sponsor. And one of the things I always do in these telephone editions is people want something to come to an end. That's the beauty of the curated. So like in the movies, we have the end and who participated. In today's 3-minute edition, think, change your frequency. That's the first step. Frequency went to hell. It's 24 hours. You never know when they're reading you, where they're reading you. And so don't think daily, don't think weekly. Easier said than done. And so 60% of what I do right now is devoted to the smartphone. Love the smartphone. Love what you can do with it. Why? Because I trained to be a storyteller in the dark ages. And if we had had these tools, we would have told stories in these tools. What better time to tell stories than when you can go on the phone, on a tablet, print, whatever. So that's what we're doing there. Aftenposten in Norway, one of my best projects because of the fact that the editor retired, the old respectable editor retired, and who do they hire? This is the New York Times of Norway. They hire somebody with no print background, a digital-minded editor, youngish, came to become the editor, but respecting print. The first step was, how can we make the newspaper, put the newspaper in its place? Make it look good, but who needs 6 sections of a newspaper every day? That's the first step. Newspapers should be from Monday through Friday, as long as they survive from Monday through Friday, and many of them will not. There will be always a robust weekend newspaper, but Monday through Friday, many of them will not publish. For some of them, this is 2 years away. For others, 20 years away. So anyway, I have to hurry. So we went from 6 sections to 3, and readers loved it. They feel no guilt at the end of the day because they get through their newspaper. If you have a 6-section newspaper at 11 o'clock, you have not read it, you get rid of it. Anything that gives you guilt, your cat, your boyfriend, whatever, you get rid of it, including the newspaper. But here is the important part of this. The editor, is a digital mind, and he comes to me with a question. We need to do something better with the phone. Why is it that people do this on a telephone? Just like it was print. A headline and throw it to the dogs. So we begin to think, how could you do this better? And I began to think, of course I know why they do that. Because whatever the story is, we are trained to tell the story in terms of what happened before. So what if you're dealing with the story of Ferguson, Missouri, you will see that in most newspapers today, you have the whole background of what happened a week before and 2 weeks before since this sad incident took place. The tie-back paragraph, we were forced to do that. How about telling stories for the digital age? So we begin to think, how would you tell stories on the phone? Think about story segments. Let's use the disappearance of the Malaysia Flight 170 as an example. It is 11 o'clock in the morning. This story has been around forever, and it will be around forever. All you have is 3 new things. So you don't have a headline. You only have the mystery of Flight 170 and 3 latest things that happened. That's a story segment that we call Who Said It Now. The outline, there could be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon of that day, 3 more things. You just give me what happened on the phone. You don't begin to tell me the story from the beginning. Or it could be at 2 o'clock, graphics photographs of three things, 4 photos of what happened today. Maybe a commentary. One of your writers is saying they will never find this plane, and the long commentary will be in tomorrow's newspaper. But you have 25 lines summarizing what this person is saying, or a graphic, or numbers. And at the end of the time, or the end of the day, it's like a beat, one beat at a time. If a reader actually, at 8 o'clock that night were to put them together, you will have the commentary, you'll have the graphic, you will have all of this, but you never wrote the complete traditional story. So that's important to remember. These are other curated projects we admire. For example, the Yahoo News Digest, the New York Times, and the NYT Now. Esquire's changed the frequency from monthly to weekly. So frequency. In the Postmedia in Canada, and you can read about this in the blog because I'm running out of time, we did this. There are 9 newspapers in Postmedia in all of Canada. The first one to go through the change is the Ottawa Citizen. How can you take a newspaper like the Ottawa Citizen and then apply the multimedia media quartet to it? We did this here. The online edition and the mobile edition. Sometimes the story is only a quote at 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, that's all I need to know about this story for now. This is how print went. It went into also 4 sections instead of 6, changing the names of it. And the best part, and according to Apple, the #1 for the last 2 weeks, news tablet is 6 o'clock in the evening. They have lean back stories, videos, audio, great stories. If you have not seen this, because it came out in May for the first time, the Ottawa Citizen tablet, download it. So now 6 takeaways. Make sure to have a clear philosophy in place for the flow of a story, how it evolves from the first tweet to a retrospective analysis. Every newsroom needs to do that. Do a drill in which you train everybody. How do we go from the tweet to the in-depth? Consider curated digital editions. Very important that you do that. Mobile is certainly extraordinary for breaking news, but consider curated editions and keep it short and sweet on mobile. And do print happily, connecting the dots for readers. Print is no longer the protagonist, but give it a place within the media quartet. And if you have to invest in print, start investing in your weekend edition, because that's the one that will survive. Everybody will want to disconnect during the weekend. And no pings, no sounds. Take my big newspaper, sit down somewhere, and no interruptions. But Monday through Friday, I don't think most newspapers will be publishing. I'll be dead by then, but I think that you'll remember this. Today's environment is not conducive to solo numbers. Emphasize interdisciplinary teams. Bring in design, technology, business, and editorial together to conceive products. I am amazed at the number of project teams that are put together for me, and there is nobody from advertising, or there is nobody from technology. I mean, bunch of editors and nobody else. That doesn't work. You have to deal with interdisciplinary teams. And finally, the industry needs well-trained mobile editors who can tell stories across platforms. 2 years from now, a person who can work across platforms will not find a job in the media. As I said before, these are the best times to be a storyteller. I just wish I was 29 years old. Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thanks. Did it.